Hello, everybody. Louise Edington, the Cosmic Owl of Cosmic Owl Astrology, here to you today to talk about 2025. And I have a cold, so apologies if I occasionally croak and cough. And it is just a cold, and I've got all the potions and lotions and remedies. And so I am looking after myself. So thank you for everybody who's commented with your concerns. I actually recorded this yesterday and it was terrible, so I'm redoing. And what I'm going to do today is give you a general overview of 2025. I'll mention some key dates and give you just a feel of what's going on in the whole year ahead. Obviously, I'm going to look in more detail later. I'm not going to be sharing charts today. This is just going to be a real general overview. I always upload a transcript and we can turn on closed captioning, right? So there's the closed captioning. There's always a transcript below, and you can see that as you read. I also upload an AI created version of what I'm saying as well. So, you've got all the ways of doing it. I also pulled 3 cards for the year as well, so stay to the end for those. But first of all, thank you and welcome to all the new subscribers. I really, really appreciate every one of you. I'm loving the way the channel is exploding. I just hit 10,000 subscribers this morning, which is just astounding to me. So I'm very, very grateful to every one of you. To anybody new listening, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment. I try and respond with at least a heart to every comment. Now, this year ahead is going to touch on politics, but we'll keep most of the politics to the videos I'm doing with Professional Aquarian. Follow her channel too. That's Kathy Beale, Professional Aquarian, like as in an Aquarian, and Andrew Bassano Brewer on Facebook. So you can go follow those as well. But this one is just going to give that general overview. But I will touch on some global politics because I know a lot of people are really concerned about the state of the world. And I'll give you my opinion on it when we get to those points. But I just want to share some brief notes before I just quickly go through some big dates. So, why is it such a big year? Because there's so many planets changing signs. The only 2 planets of the main ones that I used that are not changing signs are Chiron and Pluto, but I would add Eris to that actually. Eris is a dwarf planet as well as Pluto, so I think we have to use both. But the 3 of those are staying in the same signs. So Chiron is staying in Aries for the whole of 2025. Chiron has been opening our identity wounds up, our identity wounds collectively and individually, been asking us to really get clear on who we are. That's going to continue. And Pluto is now in the sign of Aquarius, which is radical revolution, but also the shadow of Aquarius, which can be very authoritarian. So Pluto's only just really finally moved into Aquarius as I record this. And, we're already seeing this kind of battle between autocracy and democracy. That's very Aquarian. And Pluto is bringing that to the fore, all right, for everybody. So, and Eris is in Aries. She has been in Aries since the 1920s. She fights for the outsiders. She's had a lot to do with fighting for women's rights, civil rights, all that kind of stuff, fighting for the individual in the collective, for individual rights. So she continues to do that for a long time yet. But this year will bring us, 2025 rather, will bring us Neptune, the planet of spirituality, leaving Pisces and moving into Aries, but then also moving back into Pisces before the year is over, and closing to go and close out what began in 2011. All right, so Neptune will not finally move into Aries until 2026. So in 2025, we're going to get this shifting between the last sign of the zodiac, Pisces, the chaos, amniotic fluid of creation, which makes me laugh when I say chaos, because when I show the cards, you'll see it, into Aries, which is like new beginnings, pioneering, new starts. All right, so you're going to get that vibe, and there's a lot of switching of very many things between the signs of Pisces and Aries. Uranus will also enter Gemini, leave Taurus, but before the year is over, it will move back into Taurus so it can finish out the journey that it started in 2018, because Uranus spends about 8 years in a sign. Neptune spends 14 years in a sign. So these are big changes. Now then, this is where I wanted to mention some fears that might come up. The last couple of times Uranus moved into Gemini, there were wars. But, I kind of think we are already in this communication hybrid kind of battle war. Does that mean I think there's going to be no other kinds of war? Well, there already is. If you look at, Syria and Ukraine and so on and so forth. But the one thing I do want to mention before everybody freaks out that there's going to be war is that war now looks very different than it used to. Even in Ukraine, yes, there are boots in the ground, there are trenches, but a lot of it is information warfare, cyber warfare, taking out communications. It's a very different time that we're in now. So just don't project fears into the future of what could happen, because I'll probably look back at all the times that Uranus moved into Gemini nearer the time and go, look, all these other planets are in different places now, right? So history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. There are similarities, but it could be more of this kind of space war, with Starlink or something being part of the picture. You get the idea, because Gemini is very much is an air sign, war of ideas, war of, communications. We've also got Pluto in Aquarius, another air sign. And we've got a lot of Libra energy started because the Venus star point, where it moved back into Libra in 2022. So we're definitely in an age of air. We had a great mutation of Jupiter and Saturn at 0 Aquarius. So everything that's going on is more airy right now in so many ways. So I wanted to kind of allay your fears. And it does feel to me, with like cable cutting, undersea cable cutting, with propaganda, with, social media kind of takedowns of people. This is very air, if you like. So anyway, Saturn is consequences, structures, mastery, elderhood, wisdom, also blocks and determination. Will leave Pisces and enter Aries, but also re-enter Pisces at the end of the year. So 2025, we're going to get a glimpse of what Neptune, Uranus and Saturn changing signs will do, because all three are going to kind of go back and forth. I do want to mention, though, that Saturn and Neptune are also in a very historical combination while they're changing signs. So are Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, all speaking to each other too. So this is very historical. So Jupiter spends about a year in each sign, and Jupiter is generally luck and expansion. Is in Gemini, will move into the sign of Cancer, which is the sign of the home, the family, love, but also nurturing, sense of safety and security and self-care. So you can expect me to rattle on about self-care even more when Jupiter moves into Gemini. The nodes only change signs every about 18.5 months. And so the nodes are going to move back from Aries and Libra into Pisces and Virgo. The nodes always move in that retrograde motion through the signs. And so the nodes will join the Neptune-Saturn pair dance through these same signs. Incidentally, both that will also be joined by a Mercury retrograde dance and the Venus retrograde dance. So, again, huge. Okay, so I do want you to know that this is just nuts this whole year, really, with this changing signs kind of thing. Then the eclipses are pretty wild this year, and I will talk briefly about them. I'll probably do a whole eclipse kind of class, but I do want to say they are pretty wild, especially the last one. I'll give you dates for those. Mars changes signs, pretty fast. He's got about a 22-month cycle around the chart, but Mars will be retrograde. We'll start the year retrograde in Leo because we've got that retrograde coming up very soon and move back into Cancer. And that's kind of prepping us for Jupiter in Cancer in a way. So Venus also turns retrograde every 19 months. And she spends the least time retrograde than any planet, actually. And I do my famous Venus retrograde heroines journey class coming up, so watch for news on that. I'm preparing the sales page now, and there will be an early sign up bonus, okay, or whatever they call it, but Venus is going to retrograde between Aries and Pisces, so we've got a lot of stuff going on between that last sign of the zodiac, endings, and the first sign of the zodiac, new beginnings, and a lot of revisiting, rehashing. It's just quite the year, to be quite honest. So, whoa, amazing stuff. Okay, so I'm just trying to get my list up so I can just go through the highlights of the dates month by month. I'll hopefully get to creating a meme about this as well, but I've got so much on at the moment, and then this cold kind of took me down a bit. But January starts with a bang. There's two really significant aspects. The first one is January the 3rd. We have the second of three Mars Pluto oppositions. This one will be at 1 Leo Aquarius, the sign of the people, Aquarius, the sign of the leaders, Leo. And this is the second. The first one was at the last degrees of Cancer, Capricorn, and that was 2 days before the election. And by the time of the second one on January the 3rd, Mars will be retrograde and revisiting things. Just saying, we keep promising a turnaround in leadership, particularly around the US one, because Mars does go retrograde on the US North Node. So watch this space. I often find the middle of three retrogrades are the kind of most tense part of three aspects because of a planet going retrograde. And then we'll announce the third one when we get to it. Now, the other main aspect of that month is that Mars moves back into the sign of Cancer after opposing Pluto, and we'll finish that whole retrograde journey in the sign of Cancer. And on the day that Mars moves back into Cancer, the sign of safety, security, family, and the USA is a Cancer country, incidentally, Mercury squares Neptune. And at that point, Mercury will be direct, Neptune will be direct. Mercury will be on the galactic center at 27 degrees Sagittarius. Neptune will still be at 27 degrees Sagittarius. And this is the signs of truth, faith, belief, clouds of unknowing, collective unconscious. But with both direct, this just kind of feels like clouds clearing, even more information being found out. All right. So, people keep going, when is this going to change and things? This steps, all right. Some of it will come out, we'll start to see things. But anyway, so that's January the 6th. So I don't think I'm going to talk about any of the other aspects other than on January the 11th, the nodes will shift back from Aries to Pisces, right? So that's moving to the Aries Virgo axis. Virgo is the sign of service, detail, analysis, meaning. It's also the M's, the divine feminine, if you like, the Marys. Pisces is the sign of spirituality and magic and trust and faith. And so we move into this time of being called forth towards being more of kind of a practical, spiritual kind of energy. All right. But it's also got this analysis kind of detail of what's going on in the world. So more about that later as well. But that's a big shift. Okay. Because it moves past the world point where incidentally, the nodes will sit at the world point for those first 2 days. That's always a big turning point in the world. And that's 0 degrees of cardinal signs. Aries, Cancer, Libra, and, oh my God, my Capricorn. So we're at a major turning point as well because of that. So the nodes, again, shift signs on January the 11th. By the way, if you want real nitty-gritty detail of aspects on a daily basis, I write on my Substack daily for my paid Substack subscribers. And I have a private membership community called The Nest. You can find that on my website. The Nest private membership community gets a call every week. They get discounts, they get access to some classes or discounts off classes, and they also get a coupon for the Substack. So you kind of get everything if you go in the Nest. So one more, well, actually, just briefly, a couple of extra dates in January. January the 14th, Venus will square Jupiter just as Jupiter is just hit the station direct degree at 11 Gemini. And Venus at that point will be in Pisces, where she's exalted, the sign of faith. And so this is 11 gateway number of the square between the two benefics. And it's a closing square because Venus will start moving towards Jupiter. She'll do that very slowly though, because she is going retrograde. But but this is really a sign that we're starting to close out a cycle of this rebirth that we're in, one of the cycles. On January the 15th, the sun will oppose Mars. That's approximately the middle of the retrograde. That's the only reason I'm telling you that. So just know that kind of things will start to turn around from that as well at that point, from what Mars is revisiting about protection, guardianship of ourselves and the state and many other things. On January the 18th, Venus will conjunct Saturn heading into her retrograde, but Venus will conjunct Saturn, and Venus-Saturn conjunctions are often kind of a clarity point or a slap in the face kind of point. They can be a bit of a wake-up call, but there are also moments of real clarity And in Pisces, this really fits with the spiritual journey we are all on, that I will talk about more as we look at the cards. All right, so I think we're about done with January. There are lots of other aspects, of course, but I don't want this to be super long. Okay, so I'm just going to the end of January. There is one. On the penultimate day of January, January the 30th, Uranus stations direct and starts moving towards Gemini. And that's at 23 Taurus, which is the discovery degree of the dwarf planet series. It's where Venus and Uranus met last year. I'll talk more about that later as well. But Uranus is the planet of radical change and the benevolent revolutionary, if you like. Sometimes delivers it with a 4x4 around the head, with some shocks and surprises, but it's also some awakenings. So that's an important day to note as well. That's January the 30th. All right, so into February. On February, we have a big cluster on February the 1st. Okay, so Venus conjuncts Neptune and the nodes, and the moon is there as well in Pisces. So we've got this massive lineup of Piscean energy on the Pisces North Node. And this is at 27 and 28 degrees Pisces, with Venus in her exalted sign. So she's into this higher love at this time. Neptune in Pisces is spirituality. The North Node is our potential. The moon is the people, but it's also family and our emotions. That February the 1st is like this massive, massive spiritual upgrade kind of energy. And it's all in square to that galactic center that I mentioned before. So, just kind of, I would put yourself in a space on February the 1st to do some major kind of meditative work and to receive information from source spirit. All right, so moving on. On February the 4th, Venus moves into Aries and is already in the shadow of her retrograde by then. Look for details on that Venus retrograde class. But also on February the 4th, Jupiter stations direct at 11 degrees Gemini. Remember, I mentioned that gateway number change. Jupiter's going to start heading back over the degrees it was retrograde at, and heading to Cancer later in the year. But all these planetary stations are turning points, really, and it's often where things start to be revealed that you've been working on during the retrograde. Okay, I would say with Jupiter and Gemini, it's about which information you can believe, which information you can trust, also on your community and your alliances and relationships. There's a vague overview of that. So on February the 7th, Neptune actually conjuncts the North Node. So that's kind of a little continuation, really, of what began on February the 1st. So that whole first week of February is like this big, whew, like, like Jesus is coming down again or whatever, like the second coming. Not that I really believe in the second coming, but it's that kind of energy of this, wow, I can really feel it, this spiritual kind of upgrade that I've heard so many people talk, or spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it. All these words are inadequate for what it is, but it's almost like this real awareness of the interconnectedness of it all is going to whoosh down early in February. So, all right. So I'll finish by giving you the retrograde dates before I leave, by the way. But I'm just looking for any other major aspects in February. I'm really trying to stick to the major ones because I realize I overgive information at times. All right, so February the 23rd, Mars stations direct at 17 degrees Cancer, and we'll start retracing those steps. Now, if you've watched Kathy, Andy, and I, 17 Cancer hits a lot of the players' charts in the big kind of stuff that's going on in the world. It hits the NATO ascendant and things like that. And as I record this, the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte made a speech basically saying, you know, NATO is not going to let Russia and China and Iran be named, I think, take over and turn the world into an autocratic oligarchy. So I think you'll start to see even more actions happening after that to shore up our safety and security in the West. But also, consequently, they're getting hit too, but in a different way. So, you know, I think they may feel like their safety and security is under threat. So, all right. So, March the 1st, Venus will station retrograde at 10 Aries. My class actually starts in February. So, it's a 7-week class with 8 calls. All right. So, watch for the space. 10 Aries are 1 new beginnings, but Venus has got to go backwards into Pisces to finish up some work before she does. So interesting journey that's going to be into your own personal underworld. All right, March. We're on into March. And a big day in March is March the 14th. The moon by this point will have moved all the way around into Virgo, okay? And we have a full moon at 23 Virgo Pisces, but it's the first eclipse. It's on the nodes, okay? And this full moon is in a trine to Uranus and also in a quincunx to Eris. Yeah, because it's in Virgo and it's on that practical mystics kind of energy, bringing breakthroughs based on our core values, Taurus, and what our roots really are. This is going to be a really big kind of eclipse for kind of analysis and for saying, where am I at now on this spiritual awakening journey, and how can I do more meaningful work in the world? Obviously, I'll talk a lot more about that nearer the time, but I want you to know that this is the actual eclipse itself. The full moon is at 23 Virgo Pisces, and Uranus is just moved to 24 Taurus. Again, it's got this vibe of really being very much about core values, but also like a human upgrade because of the 23. I'm not going to go over why again, but the Saturn is also conjunct the sun in this eclipse in the sign of Pisces. So you're going to get some real clarity. Eclipses are resets and occult kind of things, revealing hidden things, but also, you know, it's a lunar eclipse, so it's both lights shining light on something. So that's a big eclipse. All right. Okay, so I will briefly mention that on March the 15th, Mercury starts its first retrograde of the year in Aries, going to move back into Pisces. Remember, we've got that Aries, Pisces kind of dichotomy going on all year. Birth, death in Pisces, and new beginnings in Aries, because Pisces is the amniotic fluid and chaos from which we all come. So, amazing stuff. Okay. Diving forward through March, the Venus star point, the point in the middle of Venus retrograde, will occur on March the 22nd at 2 degrees Aries before Venus retrogrades back into Pisces. That will be the new morning star Venus point that she is birthing for the next 9.5 months from that point. All right. So, you know, that's a significant date as well, which is why I do that class. Okay. March 27th, Venus has moved back into Pisces and will meet Neptune one more time at the very last degree of Pisces. Endings, beginnings. What are something's being birthed? We're in this womb, okay? March the 30th, Neptune moves into Aries for the first time. That's a big shift. And obviously, I'll talk more about it later. But, you know, Neptune in Aries is going to be so very different to the sign of Neptune in Pisces. Neptune is the modern guide for Pisces. And in Aries, you know, traditional astrology would say that not very happy there, but this is like a determination to that towards that personal growth in my view, especially this mix of watery energy with Neptune and fire energy with Aries. It speaks to one of the cards I got for the year, so you'll see that at the end. April the 1st, April, I'm not going to. Oh, I will briefly mention that Venus goes back over the Pisces North Node again on April the 1st, April Fool's Day. It's going to be a really gaslighty kind of energy, but also a higher love energy. So you'll probably get taken in really easily if people do stupid April Fool's things. I always find them quite weird. Some are quite funny. I can't be bothered with it myself. So that's just me. All right. So on to April. April the 7th, Mercury stations direct at 26 Pisces, which is conjunct Neptune, conjunct that North Node, and conjunct Saturn, because Saturn has moved to 25 Pisces then. And Venus and Saturn and Mars are in an aspect to each other, and Mars just stationed direct. So we've got this massive watery trine with Mars, action, Saturn, breaks, and and mind, Mercury, stationed direct, all speaking to each other. Another big turning point, all right, of clarity. Huge, in fact. All right. Okay, April the 12th, Venus stations direct, 24 degrees Pisces. Things start to turn around on that journey as well. That creative journey, new relationships, all that kind of stuff. April the 18th, Mars moves back into Leo, starts to really finish the retrograde journey. Mars in Leo is more flamboyant, but more joy-filled. And Mars has kind of learned a bit of a lesson during the retrograde, in my opinion, about being more protector rather than warrior. Okay, briefly, April 24th, Venus passes the North Node in Pisces yet again, then meets Saturn later on April the 24th, still in square to the galactic center. The galactic center is like sends waves of new truths and information down about belief, faith, and higher understanding and knowledge from the galactic center. So it's getting a lot of activation. Okay. April 30th, Venus moves back into Aries, starts to finish her retrograde journey, but she then meets Neptune at 1 degree Aries, just shy of her star point. Water, fire, spiritual upgrade, like love coming in. I just think these aspects are astounding. On May the 4th, Pluto stations retrograde, which it does every year. But this is at 3 Aquarius, but Pluto is done with Capricorn, right? So Pluto is not going to retrograde back into the sign of Capricorn again. I will say about when planets station direct or retrograde from our perspective, especially the slower moving planets, really it's only around the station dates that are the big churny turnaround points, the big reveals. You know, because otherwise we'd be having revelations from Pluto for a whole 5 months of the year every year. But that doesn't mean that he's not retracing steps. He revisits things occasionally. But if you expect things to really feel churny a few days either side of the stations is the time. Okay, Ceres has been quiet. And as I record this, Venus, Ceres, and Pluto are meeting at 0 Aquarius on December the 7th. But Ceres is kind of following Venus along for a while. But then when Venus turns direct, she'll start scooting ahead. I kind of see that as Persephone and Demeter in the Hades, in the story. But Ceres will meet that Pisces North Node, another activation of that on May the 5th. She is grief, forgiveness, needs met and unmet, kind of that feeling of loss, but also finding again. It works within and without. Ceres moves into Aries on May the 16th. She has just over a 4-year orbit, by the way. So, she spends a fair amount of time in each sign generally, depending on retrogrades. But Ceres in Aries is ready to say, I've been learning, how to let go of a lot of these feelings of grief and loss, perhaps about having unmet needs as a child or unmet needs from society. And I'm ready to do that extraordinary self-care all the time and say that really the only one that can change is me. So, and it's a truth, that one, right? Okay, so May the 18th, Jupiter now back to 25 Gemini squares those lunar nodes. That's a big turning point in thinking and perceptions again as well. We are going to move out of that. We've had so much of that, perceptions and beliefs changing and shifting because of all this information that's flying around, and learning to see the gaslighting and all those things. Things are going to shift out of that. Okay, over this year, gradually. So on May the 24th, Saturn will move into Aries, joining Neptune, but they don't quite meet yet. But Saturn in Aries is so determined and very much like it's time to start taking action and doing shit. Excuse my language. But of course, he is going to go back into Pisces before the end of the year to finish up some things. Now we're well into June, and I'm just looking, okay, not till June the 9th, really, many major aspects. Jupiter moves into the sign of Cancer for about a year. Jupiter in Cancer is very much about doing that self-care, looking after you and yours, expanding your basis of safety and security, and making sure you're doing really, kind of closing down your shell a little bit and saying, go, just expand that inner life. So Cancer is associated with the stomach too, though. So it could, Jupiter in Cancer can mean hitting the cookie jar too much, but we'll see. Mars leaves the sign of Leo and moves into Virgo on June the 17th, moving quite quickly by that point. And Mars in Virgo is more determined to act from a place of deep meaning and service, right? So that's good. June the 18th, Jupiter, now in Cancer, squares off to Neptune, now in Aries. And that is faith and belief and trust that you can start this, that you can really start local and build up your new community and life, despite what's going on in the world, right? It's very creative, that energy. So nothing much else in June. Into July, Venus leaves the sign of Taurus, which she's been in for a while. I think I missed when Venus went into Taurus, but that's okay. Well, I'll go into more detail later on with all these things. But she went into her own sign of Taurus. But before she leaves the sign of Taurus, she meets the planet of radical change, Uranus, at the anaretic liminal tense degree. That's another real threshold of change. So then she goes into the sign of Gemini on July the 4th. Oh, July the 4th, right. And also on July the 4th, Neptune stations retrograde at 2 Aries, which is a Venus star point. That's going to be another big turnaround. All right, so that's going to be another big station point. And it almost feels like, to me, like the beginning of a new US revolutionary change, but in a different kind of way to before. One more living about the US is going to live up to its ideals now, or are we going to start reviewing how we've lived up to the idea of the US? Keeps being called like this great experiment. Well, there's definitely been things wrong, right? But anyway, July the 13th, Saturn then stations retrograde at almost 2 degrees Aries. So they're both kind of hitting that Venus star point from March the 22nd and saying, all right, we see, where kind of maybe, for an example, I'm not saying it's exactly how it showed up, being the, fighting against the world and being the policeman of the world is not working. But in a personal sense, this is also going to be a review of your own actions and part in all of this, okay? So July the 18th, oh, that's an intense period. Neptune stationing retrograde, then Saturn. And then on July the 18th, Mercury stations retrograde 15 Leo. And this retrograde will be entirely in a fire sign again. Fire is creation, ideas, passion, and Leo is the sign of leaders. Just saying. So on July the 20th, Mars moved into Virgo. It's already moved to 19 Virgo, but Mars will hit the South Node in Virgo, saying, are you living a purposeful and meaningful life according to holistic mind, body, spirit? Okay. Oh, I will mention that on July the 23rd, Venus will square off to Mars in Virgo, and that's at 21 degrees Gemini to Virgo, square my sun, or opposing. Anyway, Venus and Mars, the divine feminine, the divine masculine. Venus will start catching up to Mars now. This is a closing square. All right, so they're going to meet again. The cosmic lovers are heading towards each other again, having gone through their retrograde lessons. So I'll talk more about that at the time. But on July the 24th, we have a new moon with the moon at 2 Leo. And so it's a new moon. So it's the sun and moon at 2 Leo. But that's opposing Pluto. And that's activating those Mars-Pluto opposition degrees too. That's a big new moon, another big potent point of death and rebirth, transformation, and so on. On July the 30th, Chiron stations retrograde in Aries. Again, I remember I said Chiron is one of the few energies that does not change signs this year. And so we'll look at that retrograde more closer on. So, oh, Venus is trotting along now. So Venus is moved into the sign of Cancer. When did she move into there? Venus moved into the sign of Cancer July the 30th and immediately squares both Saturn and Neptune. If you remember, they both stationed retrograde on her star point. Venus has moved 90 degrees around the zodiac, squares that, and looks back and goes, all right, what's changing since then? What am I building? How's my spiritual awakening going, or spiritual growth, knowing that we're all interconnected, all of those things. On August the 6th, Mars moves into the sign of Libra for a while. Mars in Libra is often said to be passive-aggressive, and it can be, but Mars in Libra fights for justice, equality, and balance too. So, but it's said to be in its detriment there, and it can be a little bit spiky at times, but let's always look on the higher side, right? And try to be the higher energy or highest energy of, or highest incarnation of a planet in a sign. There is no bad placement. Okay, August the 8th, Mars, now in Libra, opposes Saturn, then opposes Neptune on the 9th. Again, looking at, are we living? Are we creating balance? Are we still fighting each other? Are we seeking to fight for justice? How are we playing our part in all of this? Mercury stations direct on August the 11th at 4 Leo. Clearly, again, I'll look at more of that later. But that, interestingly, is just 2 degrees from the US North Node, but also where Mars stationed retrograde on December the 5th, 2023. So chickens roosting, hatching, sorry, chickens hatching, all that kind of stuff, things coming back. Ceres stations retrograde on August the 11th at 16 Aries. So now Ceres is going retrograde, Venus going forward. After they meet with Pluto, they will never go back to Pluto, but they meet at 0 Aquarius, which is a hot, hot degree, December the 7th, 2024. And then, they start their cycles again. But Ceres and Venus, mother and daughter, start to move apart when Ceres goes retrograde at this point. They're going, okay, we've got some things to revisit before we meet again. Okay, so Venus conjunct Jupiter on August the 12th at 14 degrees Cancer on the US Sun, which is at 13 Cancer. Venus and Jupiter in Cancer, they're both like that place. This is a feeling of well-being, creation, expansion, all that kind of stuff. Just saying. Venus in the sign of Cancer then squares off to Ceres, which is just stationed retrograde, and that's in Cancer Aries. So this all feels very like turning point for the better in the US particularly. So because it affects everywhere, but you can tell that the US has been under threat for a long time. In many ways, the experiment that is the US Republic is being under threat. Venus will move into Leo on August the 25th, and that's girls just want to have fun kind of energy. She will oppose Pluto, first of all, though, kind of opposing, that's like the full moon from the conjunction that began on December the 7th, 2024. So they're kind of looking at each other saying, have we learned that this is by the people for all the people, right? And are our leaders learning that? And are we going to create that? I think we are, but we'll see. It's all going to take time. On August 31st, Mars in Libra, remember, fighting for justice, balance, and harmony, opposes Ceres. Are we realizing that we can go through this period of grief and loss for all the stuff we've been going through and probably still are going through, but it's time to take action around this to create that justice and balance and peace. On September the 1st, Saturn re-enters Pisces and will finish out the year in the sign of Pisces. Okay. Finishing, mopping up things from that journey, letting go of a lot of limiting beliefs, building faith, all that kind of stuff. And then on September the 6th, Uranus stations retrograde again. I think I did when Uranus moved into Gemini. But anyway, Uranus has moved into Gemini and dips back out of it again and goes into Taurus. Stations retrograde at 1 degree Gemini, with Pluto at 1 degree Aquarius, Neptune at 1 degree Aries. These three are in this astounding dance together. And I will be going in greater detail about this mini grand trine between the three. But basically, all three go retrograde, not Pluto, sorry. Pluto has done that. All three are finishing up this journey of radical, unprecedented change that we are going through. So there's a few more months left after this, but a full moon on, oh, it is the eclipse, the first eclipse. Yep, the first eclipse, September the 7th. A lunar eclipse is at 15 degrees Pisces, Virgo, moon in Pisces. The moon will be conjunct Mercury in Pisces. And obviously it is a North Node eclipse moving towards something, changing our thinking on this spiritual journey we're on. Lots of other extra aspects I could talk about, but this will be too long. Okay, so the final eclipse of the year is on September the 21st. We have 2 sets of eclipses each year, usually 2 in each, sometimes 3 in one, and they change signs that the eclipses are in about every 19 months. But this one is a new moon eclipse, and the moon and sun meet at 29 Virgo. Or is this the eclipse? Just bear with me 1 second. Oh, sorry about this. I'm just supposed to be doing something else before I did this, but I'll do it right afterwards. It is the eclipse. This one is a solar, just a partial eclipse. All right. So I'm just going to actually get the chart up so I can see it quickly. Yes, so it's partial because it's quite far from the nodes, but it is at the very last degree of Virgo and Pisces, endings, beginnings. And Saturn is almost exactly opposing this new moon. This is going to be another big ending. Eclipses are resets, and a solar eclipse is a new start. This is going to be a big hard stop to something. All right. Or a lesson in finding out that you have not been living a really virtuous and meaningful life, if you like, from integrity rather. Some of those words are so dull, but I kind of like virtue and integrity now. I've realized it's important. Okay, September the 22nd, Mars moves into their own sign of Scorpio for a while. On September the 24th, Mars in Scorpio squares off to Pluto, the modern guide for Scorpio, in Aquarius. That means Mars will be conjunct Haumea as well, the planet of birth. And so that's a point of pushing to rebirth something, pushing hard to rebirth something. Mars square Pluto is not always bad. I have it in my natal chart. It's extremely driven to transformation. And my whole life really has been about personal growth and transformation. All right, so going into October after the eclipses, just kind of looking where we're at. Venus will oppose Neptune at 0 Libra Aries. Kind of a bit of a full moon moment from the Venus star point that began on March 22nd. kind of looking into whether we're kind of where we're at on that personal growth, spiritual growth path, where we're creating it. Pluto will then station direct on October the 13th at 1 Aquarius too. So that's in aspect to all of those things. So, you know, real big growth for the future. Things are really going to start turning around at the end of the year. But as I said, it's a start, you know. I think so many of us expect like things to turn on a dime, but when we're coming out of this much turmoil and turbulence and chaos, we kind of birthing a new thing, a new being or a new earth is not easy. Let's put it that way. Okay. October the 22nd, Neptune moves back into Pisces to finish the year and mop up that journey. I think there was many major aspects after this, after the last lot of eclipses. I'm just looking. I'm not going to talk about all the Venus aspects because it's getting too long. I will say that November the 4th, Mars in Scorpio, opposing Uranus in Gemini, right before Uranus moves back into Taurus, could be a bit of a shocking month. It's at 0 degrees. But it also speaks of radical new beginnings, all right? Radical new starts of personal empowerment. Mars in Scorpio can be very much about personal empowerment. Uranus moves back into Taurus November the 7th. And then November the 9th, Mercury starts its last retrograde of the year at 6 Sagittarius, which interestingly is the same degree that Mercury stations direct at on December the 15th, 2024. So something will be revisited that occurs during the current Mercury retrograde as I record this. That's, and you know, astounding, these degrees, to be quite honest. November the 11th, Armistice Day, Jupiter stations retrograde at 25 Cancer, near the Mercury of the USA, by the way. And so Jupiter finishes the year retrograde in the sign of Cancer too. So safety, security, all those kind of things coming up again. I am going to mention the new moon on November the 20th. It's just a new moon, but it's at 28 Scorpio, and it's exactly conjunct Mercury in Scorpio. That's going to be some deep soul insights and potentially some news of flooding. November the 21st, Ceres stations direct at 2 Aries, which was the Venus star point, from March the 22nd. So that's 11 less 3, 8 months into Venus morning star iteration. She's heading towards where she disappears out of view for quite a long time when she goes behind the sun. But Ceres is saying, what lessons have you learned during this Aries individuation, Venus in Aries individuation journey? Saturn actually stations direct on November the 27th at 25 Pisces and starts heading back towards Aries, but will not re-enter Aries in the year. Mercury stations direct at 20 Scorpio, finishing that retrograde that began where the current one ends. And on into December. Why did I highlight this? Oh yeah, I know why I highlighted this. Okay, so in December, we have a full moon that's worth mentioning. So the full moon is, the moon's at 13 Gemini, opposing the sun at 13 Sagittarius. This is echoing back to the Mercury-Jupiter opposition in retrogrades that we have going on now. That's shifting information and news. And this one is really interesting because It's also square the nodes, which are going to be that point at 13 degrees Sagittarius Pisces. So the sun is square the nodes, or the new moon is square the nodes, really. That's called the bending. So that's always, or the moon wobble. It's always kind of when things kind of, there's like a ripple in time, or whatever that book was called. Interestingly, right before the new moon, just a couple of hours before, the moon will be at 4 Gemini, opposing Venus, which has moved into Sagittarius. So Venus is very involved in this new moon as well. That is going to be a bit like there could be some more news that just completely changes. But, I look at the numbers and I look at that whole energy together with the moon, the sun, the nodes being kind of where we're moving towards. It's on, set the moon, and it's a full moon. So the sun is in the sign of Sagittarius, moving towards Pisces, the North Node. This is going to be moving us towards something. This could, be something like ratifying the ERA in December of 2025, or, the voting rights bill, or bringing something back in that needed to change constitutionally. I've long said there could be constitutional amendments after all of this, because all this chaos caused by chaos agents in our world has shown up the holes in the Constitution. So, December the 10th, Neptune stations direct at the very last degree of Pisces, starts moving towards Aries again to finish that journey in 2026. December the 11th, Venus, remember she was close to that new moon, squares the nodes as well at 13 degrees, number of the goddess, number of the witch, Sagittarius, Pisces, and Virgo involved, all about truth, belief, analysis, the details. Smacks of kind of contracts and amendments and things to me, really, but we'll see, I guess. So that was December the 11th, and somehow I've managed to kind of go way off. December the 15th, Mars moves into the sign of Capricorn. Mars likes the sign of Capricorn. That's for determination and action for sure. And I'm not going to mention all those aspects. Venus moves into Capricorn as well. So Venus and Mars are catching up to each other again at the end of the year. But Venus moves into Capricorn on December the 24th. So that new cycle will actually start later. Okay. I'm not going to give all of those aspects. I think that's it for the year. That's it. But I do want to show you the cards. Okay, so just 3 cards for the year. I got the Queen of Wands, which to me is always like this spiritual personal growth card. This is there's the story of pinching up the leopard spots, but leaving enough on to remind her of where she'd come. Look at this kind of halo. It's like, I am leaning into my highest spiritual purpose, if you like. That's one way of looking at it. I'm going to actually look at the Book of Thoth for this one. Okay. And I do, again, want to thank Frederick Woodruff for saying you have to get that book if you're going to use these cards. So remember, we're moving from Aries to Pisces and Pisces to Aries in so many ways. Pisces is water, Aries is fire, and the Queen of Wands is the watery part of fire. It's fluidity and color. Okay, she also, this card also rules the degrees from 21 Pisces to 20 Aries. So Aries, Pisces again. So this is adaptability, persistence, energy, calm, authority. which she knows how to use to enhance attractiveness. She is kindly and generous, but can be impatient of opposition. She has an immense capacity for friendship and love, but always on her own initiative. The other side of this character, if people are not conscious and trying to be the best person they can, is the tendency to brood, to come to a wrong decision and react with savagery. This card can be easily deceived, so it's speaking to kind of those conspiracy theorists and gaslighting and things. And she can show herself to be stupid, obstinate, and tyrannical. So we may see both. You get to choose which one you're going to be, okay? So this can be the harboring of revenge and that kind of thing. So in the I Ching, the watery part of fire is represented by Sui. That's the 17th hexagram. It indicates reflection on impulse and the consequently even flow of action. There is great capacity for lucid conception, even flow of action. There is great capacity. There is also great capacity for lucid. There is great capacity for lucid conception and steady prosecution of work, but this is only at the bidding and under the guidance of the creative mind, or tapping into the creative mind. Okay. So there can be a liability though to some melancholy, and some escapism, or even ill-considered fury. So just be the higher energy of the Queen of Wands. Do your personal growth. Now, the middle card, I said what might stop you basically from this, and I got the Three of Wands, which is sorrow. Now, I don't think there's necessarily going to be sorrow coming from the outside, because this really is about negative thinking. So this card is dark and heavy. This is what Crowley said in the book. It's Saturn in Libra, so it can be heavy thoughts about and limiting beliefs, okay? So he says this card is dark and heavy. It is, so to speak, the womb of chaos. And I've said several times we're in the womb, right, of birthing. There's something new. There is an intense lurking passion to create, but there are monsters lurking as well. This may mean the supreme transcendence of the natural order. Secrecy is here, and perversion. He says the symbol represents the great sword of the magician, point uppermost. It cuts the junction of the two curved swords at the top. The impact has destroyed the rose. In the background, storm broods under implacable night. But I'm going to say this is the real meaning of this card for me in looking at the astrology is not letting those negative self-beliefs and stinking thinking hold you back. It means examining all those self-limiting beliefs or things that stop you manifesting the world that you want to live in. Okay. It's something we're working on in that Mercury Mind Magic class right now, but you can do this work yourself. It's just easier in a group. So the Lovers card is really the final card, kind of the outcome of the whole year. So this card, the Lovers card, is the Gemini card. And of course, we've got Uranus moving into Gemini, but we've also got Jupiter in Gemini now. So he says in this book, he said, really, the attribution of this card is the essence of simplicity. So this is the twins. And the royal marriage of all opposites. Excuse me. I'm not going to read all that Crowley says about this card, because as it's a major arcana, he talks into it. quite a lot. And there's a lot about the tree of life and things like that. I'll probably look into it more in another thing later. But the key is that this card represents the creation of the world. The hierarchs held this secret as of transcendent importance. Consequently, the initiates who issued the card for use during the Aeon of Osiris superseded the original card above described in the vision and the voice. They were concerned to create a new universe of their own. They were the fathers of science. What does that say to you? That we've become too empirical, right? And ignored the intuition part. We can't ignore the empirical side either, right? Okay, so it also speaks to me really of the mix of astronomy and astrology, right, coming together. But anyway, their methods of working, grouped under the generic term alchemy, have never been made public. It's so much, it's like these secret societies being released, right? The secret information. Okay. The subject of this card is analysis, but then followed by synthesis. And in many ways, that is Virgo, analysis, Pisces, North Node, synthesis. Okay, via Gemini, bringing together of all opposites. So again, I'm not going to read the whole thing about this card, but I do want to kind of talk about the figure that's in the air on this card. Oh, can you see it? Everybody always says it's Cupid, but I think he rightly points out that this is probably actually not Cupid. It is kind of the which Cupid was a bit kind of separated out as this cutesy little god, but the original god was Eros in the Greek pantheon, and that's the son of Aphrodite or Venus. Okay. And so, and also the sun probably Jupiter, really, or Mars, I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. This appearance in this card suggests that Hermes or Mercury, the messenger of the gods, or the guide of Gemini, was the true father. I mean, they're just myths anyway. So, you know, it's pulling these dots together. And the messenger of the gods, to my mind, is saying that love of the self and love of each other and coming together in all opposites is the way forward. All right. That's how it feels to moi. So thank you. This is a bit longer than usual. There's transcripts if you want to break it down. I'm going to actually do chapters on this one so you can keep going through. But those are some key dates for you. And 2025 is going to be quite the year, but it feels like it's the start of the end, if you like. Just a little bit of mopping up to do into 2026 before we really move into something very, very different. Much love to you. Don't forget to subscribe, leave me a thumbs up, all the things. Talk later.